Hello and welcome back to the Editorial, the podcast where we discuss everything we've got wrong since we last did an editorial.
It should be every 2 weeks, but it's never every 2 weeks.
I know, that's the problem. It would be a cleaner intro if it was.
Yeah.
I'm joined as always by Zach Michaelis.
Yeah, hello.
And as with every episode, we're going to run through every video that we have had an unacceptable number of dislikes on.
Or just an error, but yeah.
Or an error.
Yeah.
We're going to explain what we got wrong. We might apologise. We might acknowledge a mistake. Or we might...
Acknowledge.
Acknowledge.
God, yeah, you get almost like sort of like Tourette's for how desperate I wanted that. I wanted that word so badly. When you said apologise, I was like, we might.
It's coming. What do we have coming up in today's episode? Do we have any big themes, any big moments to discuss?
You know, I mean, like the last one. So we haven't got that many errors, luckily, which is good. The last time we did this podcast, by the way, was about 3 weeks ago. September the 11th. It's now sort of very early October. Yeah. Was it the 2nd? 3rd. We haven't actually got that many, which is quite good. I will say, I think we should start with this. The worst like dislike.
Oh, start big.
Yeah, I think so, but
Okay.
only because it's quite annoying what it is. It is the last editorial.
Good work, guys. We did it.
Not good work, guys. Can we slightly sincerely here, because it fucks us on the algorithm. I know we don't want this to be too big, but it's just a miserable way of suppressing it, is to just get everyone pummeling the dislike button. The last editorial had a dislike of 93, which is appalling by our standards. It's a bit rude, frankly. Can we try and create some sort of incentive? Because otherwise, every time we do this, people are just going to thwack the dislike button so that we have to re-meta editorialize on the next one, which is like
what did we do wrong last time? Anything?
No, it was just people, and you could see it because the comments were like, haha, dislike, so they have to editorialize. You're very funny, well done. Yeah.
You did it. That's so funny.
Yeah, it's quite funny. It's also quite annoying. I hate seeing those sort of numbers. And I also,
how are you incentivizing them?
Well, I don't know. We could
You're
say something
negotiating with terrorists now.
Yeah, I'm just going to beg, I guess.
Go on.
No, I'm not begging. Why don't we say something like, if we get above a certain threshold, we'll answer some of the questions. We could do that. We could do if we get
Q&A.
above, 99%, then we get a Q&A.
And not above 99%.
99. Yeah, 99 is feasible. Sometimes a normal video goes above 99.
If we get above 99%,
Like dislike.
so
no dislike.
we'll do a Q&A.
This is definitely not generally a good strategy for videos. To just tell the audience no disliking.
No disliking. And how do we up the stakes further?
No, let's not up the stakes further. We'll
We'll
do a
juggle
Q&A.
throughout.
We'll definitely not juggle.
Yeah, we'll
that
be
will be the
juggling.
lowest dislike video of all time.
A juggling Q&A.
No, we're not doing juggling. Why would we do juggling?
If it's above 99.5.
No, can we stop putting risks on this? I just want this to be a nice thing. We don't have to
Okay.
worry about the dislikes. So,
Besides last time's editorial, what else?
so let's just clear that up though. So we'll do...
Are you clearing up the lack of
We're
juggling?
going to try and... No juggling. Let's just say above 99. So please like and subscribe. Above 99, we'll do a Q&A. So the most liked comments
submit your
on the
comments this
editorial.
episode.
On this editorial. We'll do that. We'll
Absolutely baiting for engagement here.
Oh,
This is
I know.
tragic.
This is sort of
Share with your
KSI,
friends.
Jake Paul nonsense, isn't
Yeah.
it? It's terrible. Well, there you go. I hate seeing. I mean, that's just me. 93%. Do you know what I mean? It does terrible things to the ego. I'm a mess.
it does,
I
it
barely sleep at night. when I
We'll
see
do a
those
Mr.
numbers.
Beast style, rigged giveaway.
Yeah, I'm gonna win the giveaway.
Cutting satire. Cutting anti-Mr. Beast satire.
This is why we're not on Have I Got News
What
for
is
You.
Mr. Beast up to? Have you seen all the stuff
Let's
about
just
him?
move on.
It's chaos. I'd like to do a business video. I mean, not really business, but
What?
just a bit of drama.
What's
it's
going on?
nuts. We'll catch up after this, but it's utterly insane.
Okay, fine. I have no idea. I don't really pay attention to. I haven't seen anything Mr. Beast sort of controversy-wise.
We don't want to get into it. That'll drag down the ratio. Mr. Beast
that's
stands.
terrible. Let's move on.
Sorry.
So I think we're going to start. Let's just start with UK because there's only one error on UK and it's really funny.
Oh,
We have
Nigel
no-
Garage.
Nigel Garage is the error.
Oh, it is funny. But it's so embarrassing.
It's so embarrassing. Although it does look like we're sort of interaction baiting there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like it's such
so
a good
obvious.
error.
So do you want to explain?
We're not actually doing this, by the way. Basically, all the UK videos we have done since the 11th of September, from the last editorial, have all got well above the 96.5 dislike threshold.
Wow.
Yeah. Well,
That's
that's
good.
pretty good. I mean, UK normally does pretty well
Not
like that.
super controversial, yeah.
No. The only one is on the Is Reform UK preparing for government. We misspell Nigel Farage as Nigel Garage on screen.
And it's so big on screen.
Is it one of those where Tom does the massive words on screen?
It's basically the only word on screen.
It genuinely, by the way, sometimes people suspect that we are like deliberately putting in errors to get people to like comment.
We've never done
We
that.
hate the errors. Yeah, we have never done that, although it does look like that.
Yeah.
There were
And
some.
also, Thomas typoed it, presumably rewatched the video at the end. Then Ben reviewed it and then it went up. So how Nigel Garage got through, I can't account for.
I do think it's one of those where sometimes when it's so massive on screen, you sort of like, you don't even know, do you know what I mean?
You don't
When you're sort of paying too close attention, you're looking at
Yeah.
like the axes of graphs for errors and stuff like that, and then you assume Nigel Garage comes up, oh yeah, that's fine. And then you don't quite get it.
We'll be more aware of it next time. We'll keep an eye on every word.
We will try. I mean, there were some good comments on that. You've got to give it to him. Lots of good jokes. But that's the only error on UK. I think we can just move on past that. The other ones have all been fine. EU, there were two that were below the like-dislike threshold. The first is on the Austria election results explained, which came out only a couple of days ago. That was an election on Sunday of this week, where the Freedom Party, who are often the FPO, often described as far right, came out on top. There were, I'd say, sort of broadly speaking, two reasons for this. The first is, and it's something we talked about in more detail in a previous editorial, that we use the term far right.
Yes.
Flippantly, yeah, exactly. We use it in the title, and that always just invites a lower like-dislike ratio. I said this in the editorial that we did, talking specifically about when we use the terms far right, and I have since reiterated it internally. But the FPO, I think, can be fairly described as far right. The FPO really do have some quite strong takes, and it's a very British way of describing the far right. But I think what we said we would do in that editorial is that we would say, they are commonly described as far right, and then we would justify that that label. And I think we do that throughout the course of the video, but I don't think it's made sufficiently explicit, so we don't sort of go like, they're commonly described as far right because of these policies. Yeah. It's sort of like the far right party who support these things. You see what I mean? And like, sort of not making that linkage sufficiently explicit maybe, or at least it definitely contributes to like-dislike ratio, whether or not that's like fair or justified is a sort of separate question, but it's definitely true to say that it contributes to the lower like-dislike. Then there was actually an error where we say in it that they had been in coalition 2 times, but they've actually been in governing coalitions 3 times. Rory wrote this video in his defense. What he was trying to communicate in the script was that post-Jörg Haider, who is a very charismatic leader who took over the Freedom Party, I think in the late 80s or early 90s, who died in a car crash actually when he was really quite young, not very long afterwards. A little bit of trivia for you there. But Rory was trying to say that post-Jörg Haider, they joined coalition twice, but it wasn't made clear in the script, so that is an error, and we do apologise for that. That was just wrong. But those are the two things. I also think there's a claim in there, and there's not really wrong per se, and I think this happens a lot when we're trying to condense a lot of history into a very short amount of words. But there's a claim there that like the FPO move right after Jörg Haider. I'm not really sure how true that is. I think Haider's ascent is more about style than policy substance. He's just a more charismatic, sort of more vocal, maybe more populist leader. Then I don't know who his predecessor was because they're not very well known. But yeah, I think the FPO can broadly be described as pretty far right. Most of their sort of like, post-war history, they emerge out of actually sort of, I think what could be fairly described as a neo-Nazi outfit after World War II. But yeah, so that's the Austria video. I think those two things, the actual error on the number of times they've been in coalition governments, and then there's also this recurring controversy over the use of far right that I don't think we sufficiently cushioned in that video. That explains the lower like-dislike ratio. And then on the next one is the most recent video, which is how Meloni has sort of solved Italy's migration crisis. I'm not really sure what motivates this. It has a pretty high like-dislike ratio. It's like
what is it on that one? I'm just looking.
95.5, which is pretty good. It's not bad. I think what most of the comments seem to be talking about is that we are conflating the distinction between legal and illegal immigration, or regular and irregular. I mean, people want to say legal and illegal, but I think that regular and irregular is actually the distinction they're trying to appeal to, because when people think about illegal immigration, they often think about asylum seekers arriving via irregular routes, which isn't necessarily illegal, because obviously if you are deemed to be a genuine refugee, then that's a legal form of asylum under international law, a legal form of immigration under international law. And they say that we're conflating them. I don't think that's actually true. We actually make that distinction, or at least the distinction between regular and irregular, many times in the video. I think what we're probably inviting a bit of controversy for is by saying that Italy's migration crisis can sometimes be overstated. But we provide a lot of data to back that up. At least relative to other European countries, Italy just doesn't receive as many regular or irregular immigrants. It doesn't take in as many sort of new workers or refugees. It just doesn't have that big a foreign-born population, essentially. And you can measure that both by regular and irregular, and we do provide that data in the video. And I think what some, maybe Italians read this as saying is like, oh, actually your migration crisis isn't real. We don't say that. We do say, look, there has been an uptick in the number of regular arrivals by sea from basically North Africa via the Mediterranean. And there's this more sort of like, sort of philosophical question about the sort of security of a border, that clearly provokes some anxiety amongst like lots of Europeans, obviously, that they're like, their borders aren't secure in some sense. They've sort of quote, that people will say we've lost control, you see what I mean? And it's just about like at least knowing who's coming in and who's going out. That's sort of like the bigger question. The numbers are secondary. It's about having a process in place that actually works. And we do say, those are sort of like, we do at least acknowledge those as genuine concerns. But I think that just like the implication that is there in the video, that Italy's migration crisis can sometimes be overstated, or at least the sort of burden of migration on Italy can sometimes be overstated, or that it's not quite as great as that of other European countries. I think that has invited some pushback from parts of the audience. But again, not a particularly low like-dislike ratio, and in what is fundamentally a slightly more contentious topic than usual. Plus the fact there's a Meloni element. I mean, Meloni herself is a polarising figure, and in some sense it's, it depends how you read it. In some sense we're praising Meloni. I mean, you're saying that she's brought down the number of arrivals via the Mediterranean, but at the same time you're also saying that she's being not dishonest per se, but as in, there's at least a sort of superficial tension in that she's sort of talking a tough game on migration and really focusing on reducing irregular migration, but at the same time massively expanding a worker visa scheme to sort of help rebalance Italy's demographic problem. And those two things aren't necessarily in tension. Again, you can appeal to this like classic distinction between regular and irregular, but as we make clear in that video, in quite a lot of cases, the people who will be sort of naturalised, people who get those new worker visas, are people who've essentially arrived there irregularly, who work on stuff like farms or whatever, and their employers will naturalise them by getting them worker visas, something like that. So that, again, that distinction is just a bit blurrier than people sometimes like to imply. This is a wide conversation about, I think that distinction is very, very interesting, like the fact that, a lot of people basically agree with the basic premise that we have nothing against legal immigration, but we have something against illegal immigration. I think it's just that sort of like waves away the question, but the question is actually more difficult than that. It just depends what you mean by illegal and what you mean by legal, and there's not like a super clear, super obvious definition of either of those two terms, which is why, by the way, bodies like the EU or Eurostat use regular versus irregular, because there just isn't this clear distinction between those two terms. And some part of this, by the way, is just a function of the fundamental ambiguity of international law, which is why we get stuck in so many of these conversations. Anyway, this is a separate thing. But yeah, so that is Italy. That's all of EU. So we've already done UK and EU. Yeah,
so,
huge.
I'm guessing that means...
Global, and also not that many to be, honestly, there's 4.
Okay, fine.
And one is one that, the worst one of these is a Milei video. Can Milei's new budget revive Argentina's economy? There are some people pushing back on this, that pushed back at the previous video about like we don't pay enough attention to the humanitarian cost. I sort of see that. I do think we talk about the poverty line and the number of people who are in poverty in that, at least by the sort of like definition from the Argentinian statistical authority. We do talk about that in the video, but we have talked about this before, the fact that we are focusing on the economy, not the humanitarian costs, and maybe we should do more, but that is the remit of this video. It isn't a video about like the humanitarian catastrophe in Argentina. Maybe we should do a bit more to focus on that, but I don't think we have anything to apologise for there per se, because the video just is about the Argentinian economy. In the same way that when we do like an Egyptian economy video, there is a sort of implication or subtext to that, like this is obviously catastrophic for the people who are living there, but we are focusing on the economic issues at hand, and in some part for reasons of space, but also just because it's like it would require almost a separate video to just do like a whole the humanitarian crisis in Argentina video. We don't talk about that in too much depth, but the main reason, by the way, and this is one of my most embarrassing errors, and this is entirely mine, so I apologise in advance, is that at 6 minutes 30, we are talking about the month-to-month inflation rate. It's 4%. And I said it implies an annual inflation rate of 160%.
Okay.
The maths is not quite adding up. No, but the math is just basically the maths is wrong. It's actually 60%. It's a very easy mathematical error, which is that the way you calculate it is you sort of do like 1.04, 104%, and then to the power of 12. Yeah, exactly. And it comes out to like 1.6. I just forgot to subtract the 1. And that really irks me, because journalists journalists have that reputation for being essentially innumerate, you know what I mean? And like politicians generally. And I think we do quite a good job of like...
that happened though,
we do quite a good job of like pushing back against that. I think we do, like you, we're pretty statsy. I think so. And I hate when we make some sort of like silly error like that. That's horrible. Yeah, that really irks me, I'll be honest with you.
That is annoying.
Anyway, I apologise for that. Not good enough, but you win some, you lose some. No, actually, no, not you win some, you lose some.
We just lost. We just lost some.
I apologise for that. That is a sloppy error. Then we have, as always, the US content slightly lower, although higher than it used to be. So I'd say we sort of hover between 95 and 95.9. But there is a specific error on the Could Texas Turn Blue video, where when we're showing our Confederate map, we mistakenly colour Oklahoma, but not Virginia. So our Confederate knowledge is not up to scratch, unfortunately.
Apparently not.
Luckily, it doesn't come up that often these days. But we apologise for that, obviously, that was just wrong. Then on the last one, where there's an actual error, but there's one more I do think I want to talk about a little bit. On Israel invades Lebanon. At 3 minutes 34, we say northern Lebanon when we actually mean northern Israel. So classic, classic little error. And there's also, although I think this is partly because we were writing it as things were happening, so it was a bit unclear what exactly was happening. We basically say that Netanyahu approved the strike a few hours after his UN address, but actually, while the strike happened, an hour or so after the US, but he actually approved it before it then went into the UN, and then the strike happened. So those are all the errors. The one that I want to talk about. Sorry, nearly.
We almost did it.
Is the Netanyahu's political revival. That has a good. It's nearly 97. There aren't any errors per se. Some people point out that we don't talk about enough about the fact that Netanyahu's coalition as a whole, the polling isn't that great for them. It's just that Netanyahu himself is doing well. I get that. Maybe we should have made more of that, but I don't think that actually. The implication there is supposed to be that it's not actually that Israelis like Netanyahu. It's just the vote from the extremes, from the Smotrich and the Ben Gvir, is migrating to Netanyahu. Yeah, maybe, but that doesn't that's still a phenomenon worth explaining. The fact his pollings are still going up. But I think the more interesting thing, and this might be a bit niche, is that at the very end of the video, I think if I'd rewritten the video, I would like to focus more on this at the end. That's sort of what I want to talk about. We say in sort of quite passing, we just very quickly say that, okay, the politician who's currently in top of the polls, it's no longer Benny Gantz, who's head of the National Unity Party, former IDF general, basically looks very, very good in a suit, has sort of slightly more centrist vibes, or uniform rather, and was therefore everyone's favourite. But it turns out he's pretty rubbish at politics. I mean, he's been taken to pieces by Netanyahu, and that he was 30 points ahead of him, and now It depends on the poll.
Yeah.
But they're basically heading neck and neck, which is bad. Like that, the fact
That's
that
a big drop. Yeah,
well, also
huge
just
drop. Considering
it's Netanyahu as well. Like everyone hated him. You know, when on October 7th happened, everyone just thought Netanyahu was gone.
Yeah.
Now, anyway, we say very quickly. We say the other politician who's polling quite well is a guy called Naftali Bennett, who is. I don't want to get into this too much detail now because it's not. We'd probably do a whole video on this. But basically, we very quickly say that he would be more right-wing than Netanyahu. And part of the issue here is that like putting Israeli politics on like a left-right spectrum is quite difficult. Like Bennett comes from like a sort of like hawkish form of religious nationalism in Israel, which is like a relatively new phenomenon. I mean, like maybe like it's like a sort of post 73 phenomenon, really, like properly, and it was quite fringe to begin with, but it's become like more mainstream. Whereas Netanyahu is from like the sort of secular Zionism. Maybe it's not making too much sense to people, but like they're from very different parts of Israeli politics.
Yeah.
And in lots of ways, Bennett is more right wing than Netanyahu. You know. I think he's come out explicitly against the two-state solution. I'm almost 100% sure that's true, at least in the 2010s when he was very much on the right. And Netanyahu obviously at least paid lip service to it in that speech. It might have been 2009. It's one of the Israeli universities under pressure from Obama, where he said that he was in favour, at least in principle, of a two-state solution. And Bennett is also very closely associated with the settler movement. So very keen on expanding the settler movement in places like the West Bank. But whether or not he had a sort of like political transformation in, it must have been like 2021 or 2020, when he was part of this sort of like anti-Netanyahu coalition that existed very briefly before there were like a million elections. And there he sort of moderated his politics a little bit, in part because he was in coalition with, including some sort of basically Arab parties. And so for that to work, they really, they had to find some compromise. People are saying like, oh, it depends, the direction of a future Bennett government, a hypothetical Bennett government, whether you think it'll be more or less right wing than the current Netanyahu government depends on whether or not you think you would get sort of 2010s Bennett or this reformed Bennett. And the implication in that video is that I sort of think you get 2010s Bennett. I think that the political, he had to sort of moderate because of the political circumstances at the time. The political circumstances are completely different now. He would never be able to go into coalition with Arab parties. It just wouldn't happen. And the mood in Israeli politics is very sort of hawkish and right-wing on security issues. So I think he would just go that way. I think it's part of his appeal is the fact that he was perceived as being as right-wing on Netanyahu on most issues, but he's just not Netanyahu. He sort of gives you, Gantz, the problem with Gantz is that he's, at least to some part of the Israeli electorate, not hawkish enough. He's seen as like too close to Americans, but at least he's not Netanyahu, whereas Bennett ticks both boxes. He's not Netanyahu and he's super hawkish. But yeah, so I think that was something that I sort of, having written that video afterwards, I was like, oh, actually we could have spent a bit more time on that. Anyway, that's just a little thought for you guys.
There you go, bonus thought.
Yeah, there you go, but free
bonus thought.
Crazy.
They better like that.
I'm expecting a 99.5. This is going to be the most liked video ever. Yeah, I think that is everything, actually. Yeah, which is pretty good, actually.
Yeah, not bad.
Yeah.
Especially considering it was 3 weeks.
Yeah.
What about that?
There you go. Do we have anything else?
I don't think so.
Do we want to talk about magazine? Or do we?
It's a bit late now.
Yeah, it's a bit late, actually. We probably should have plugged it at the start.
Probably, yeah.
Well, you can buy the magazine if you want.
His last time.
This is
buy
the
it.
least enthusiastic.
If you want to buy the
plug.
next one, looks like that.
Yeah, well, there you go.
It's on the store. We'd really appreciate it.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's everything.
That's everything.
Thank you very much for watching.
Thank you. We'll see you next time.
In 2 weeks.
Juggling.
Nice, not juggling.